Carmen's been away for a long time.
Yeah, I hope Ryder's okay. Anyways, what are we covering this time?
Matt Walsh. He made a video on Sonic 3 that wasn't very good. The video is titled Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie that broke me as a father.
Geez, I don't think it was that deep, but regardless, let's get into it.
When a man becomes a father, he's called upon to make sacrifices for his family. And often these will be small sacrifices. Sometimes they'll be larger, though, more significant. And on even rarer occasion, the duties of fatherhood will require him to make the kind of sacrifice that, up to that moment, he would have thought himself incapable of making. These are the moments when a man must become a hero, when he must lay his very life on the line. And this may take many forms. Perhaps he's rushing into a burning building to rescue his child from the fire. Perhaps he has to pull his loved one away from the path of a speeding train because they've been tied to the tracks by bandits or whatever. Or most harrowing of all, he may be compelled by his paternal obligations to go to a movie theater and watch Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Because getting up to go see a movie is so taxing, apparently.
Now, a man in that situation would, of course, much prefer to be engulfed in flames or hit by a speeding train.
I don't see how taking your kids to see a movie is that bad in terms of things one has to do as a parent. It's a family movie, it's not that hard.
He endures Sonic the Hedgehog 3 for the sake of his children, whom he loves. And over Christmas break, that is precisely the situation that I found myself in. Now, for the record, I'll say I greatly enjoyed most of the time that I spent with my wife and kids these past 2 weeks. We had a lot of fun together. We played football, we played outside, we shot BB guns, we played card games and board games. I completely wrecked my whole family in Monopoly 2 nights in a row. Wasn't even close.
Sure you did. I'm definitely taking that at face value and not questioning that in the slightest. However, unlike you, Carmen has faced the gauntlet that is surviving in a round of exploding kittens. Come back when you reach that level of success. Otherwise, hide in shame.
We took the kids ice skating. I was ice skating. My wife and kids were left dumbstruck by my gracefulness and elegance on the ice. They didn't say that, but I know they were thinking it.
So you fell on your ass face first and your kids laughed at you and a neighboring family submitted the clip to AFV? You're not fooling anyone. You're not that skilled in these tasks.
Is AFV even still around?
Surprisingly, yes, but with the new host, it might as well be dead as a doornail.
These were all wonderful experiences, yet things took a rather distressing turn on the final Thursday of the break when my 8-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter asked me to take them to go see Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Somehow you're more of a child than the literal child you're taking care of.
And I did. God help me. God help me.
I know I'm not one to talk, but something tells me he's just told you that you're on your own.
Now, before I offer my brief review of this thing that I hesitate to call a film, I must first acknowledge, in all fairness, I never saw Sonic the Hedgehog 1 or Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
And just like that, any criticisms you have are immediately invalid. If you're gonna judge a sequel to a movie, you need to see the previous entries first.
It's possible that one cannot fully appreciate the narrative complexities of Sonic the Hedgehog 3 without having seen the first 2 chapters in this epic hedgehog saga.
Yeah, you can't. In fact, this reminds me of something from a video before. In passing down your trauma to be an anti, I mentioned Magic Mush's opinion of the modern Sonic franchise and how his takes make him closed-minded. Oh, cut the spooky music. It's just images of Bart and Fry. Weren't you complaining in your videos that you couldn't take modern Sonic too seriously because Sonic was too cartoony? What do you think you're doing now? You're doing just that. Except Sonic actually can be taken seriously if you're not closed-minded. With you, you're just being a pussy about content you don't like. But I never really explained the closed-minded part, as it didn't have much to do with the video. But here I can elaborate a bit more. Now we all know how localization happens to Japanese franchises that don't need it, especially older ones, much to our dismay.
Something something can't count for shit. Something something Mystic Quest.
Exactly. As a result, people in the West, for the longest time, aren't used to the way the Japanese write their stories. Sure, Satam had somewhat of a serious tone, and maybe the Archie comics, but unlike other Japanese franchises like Pokemon, Sonic was never shown to be written like an anime like other Japanese properties are. Notice how even in older anime, they have more complex plots that only franchises in the 2000s or very early 2000s and 10s would have? And compared to Western animation of the time, they're not as on the ball as the Japanese are. Westerners were conditioned to believe that animated characters, especially small furries like the ones from Sonic, could never be in situations that are serious, or that characters of such nature could be in situations that aren't the same 10 Kids show plots. Meanwhile, in Japan, they've been doing serious toned animated shows for a while. Most Western animation from the late 70s were just funny comedies. Meanwhile, in Japan, Mobile Suit Gundam happened. You'll notice this tone shift if you've ever watched any Saban-era Power Rangers back-to-back with its Super Sentai counterparts. That isn't to say that cartoony Western Sonic doesn't have a place in this world. The Adventures of series and SatAM are iconic in their own ways, but there's always been the tone shift between classic Sonic being written like an American cartoon, because that's the only things America had for the time, and modern Sonic being written like the Japanese piece of media that it is. And while yes, the OVA did exist, it didn't receive the same amount of popularity in the West as the cartoons did, so not a lot of people saw it. That is why people who act like Sonic can't be taken seriously are closed-minded, because they don't consider the proper way the Japanese do things, and that the West, at least in terms of Sonic, have only just now figured out how to do via the movies.
Maybe the other two movies are works of staggering artistic genius that would elevate the third installment and lend it the sort of context necessary for me to have appreciated it and enjoyed it, instead of feeling like I was being waterboarded with high fructose corn syrup the whole time.
Yeah, you would have. Also, I hate to use this label because of how the left has ruined it, but high fructose corn syrup is such a Karen phrase. No one aside from people with health conditions should realistically give a shit about the microscopic levels of that sort of thing in food.
But I doubt it. I mean, this is the kind of movie where Jim Carrey plays two characters. One is the evil villain, and the other is the evil villain's evil grandfather in old age makeup. And the two break into an impromptu dance routine that makes no narrative sense but lasts approximately 87 minutes.
Dr. Robotnik has always been a silly and wacky character. Hell, even people in the West realized that back in the day. Robotnik wouldn't be much of a meme if they didn't.
It's the kind of movie where those same characters before the dance routine actually look directly into the camera and explain that they're being played by the same actor.
You phrase it as if the scene doesn't make that obvious at first. Them saying that they're played by the same actor in unison is meant to play off of the already existing joke. They're keeping up the joke rhythm, if that makes any sense.
I must assume, and I think assume safely, that there is nothing in the other two films that would make this one any less obnoxious or horrifically stupid. I'm not going to bother explaining the plot of this film in any detail. I wasn't tracking it that closely, to be honest. I was mostly fighting to stay awake.
Then why bother with this review if you didn't pay attention? Also, I know you didn't like the movie, but falling asleep in the theater is kinda rude. Not only rude, but also setting a bad example for your children. I guess Drama Queen was right. Theater etiquette is dead.
This is the kind of movie that bores you to the point of putting you to sleep, but also annoys you at the same time. It's kind of an odd combination to be both sleepy and deeply irritated simultaneously. As for the plot, I can only tell you that Sonic is the good hedgehog, which you may know. There's also an evil hedgehog voiced by Keanu Reeves.
His name is Shadow.
And I like Keanu Reeves, by the way, but like every other voice actor in this film and most voice actors in most children's films that have been made for the past 20 years, he has no talent as a voice actor and doesn't understand how to act with just your voice. But he's famous, so that's good enough, I suppose.
Are you gonna elaborate on this lack of acting skill or not?
So Sonic has to stop the evil hedgehog and his evil cohorts, the Jim Carrey dancing duo I mentioned earlier, from blowing up the world with a big laser. And this has been the evil plan of every evil villain in every blockbuster franchise film for the past 3 decades.
Citation needed. Also, this is the plot point of the game that the movie is adapting, that being Sonic Adventure 2. Surely you have to have heard of it, considering the scene from the games about this became a meme via that one gag dub of it. Then again, you may have not heard of it, I guess. It's not like the video has over 6 million views or anything.
It's a formula that this movie is not interested in deviating from. This is not the sort of movie that deviates from formulas. Now, If you're wondering why the evil hedgehog and the two Jim Carreys want to explode the world and murder 8 billion people in a cosmic blast that they will also die in, it's because the older Jim Carrey's granddaughter, I think, was killed, and now he wants to commit murder-suicide because life isn't worth living. Like, that's real. That's in the movie. He actually declares his suicidal intention as well. Now, if that seems like weirdly bleak and dark for a kids' movie where the characters bust out impromptu dance routines and randomly break the fourth wall and constantly speak in internet lingo from 2019.
By character, it's one person, that being Robotnik, and the fact that it's dated is the point of the joke. Also, if Nikkei can be a post-apocalyptic wasteland with government corruption and human rights being taken away from beings that might as well be human, but still have sexy bunny girl competitions, then Sonic is allowed to be funny and still feature mature subject matter. This goes back to how I mentioned how Japan writes their media compared to the West. Western media almost never took both lightheartedness and seriousness routes. It's always one way or the other. However, Japanese media always knew how to balance both. They knew how to keep the balance between seriousness and lightheartedness. And it wasn't until the 2000s that the West figured out how to do that. And that was only because that's when anime peaked. As this movie is adapting Sonic Adventure 2, a Japanese game, it's able to balance the tones as that's what was pulled off in the source material.
There's a lot of that, by the way. Just as one example, at one point, Jim Carrey says, "Damn you, autocorrect."
So does Shadow in the game, but I don't see you complaining about that now, do I?
If it seems weirdly bleak and dark for that kind of movie, it's because it is. This is a movie, like so many kids' movies these days, that schizophrenically darts back and forth from being ironic to painfully self-serious to goofy to earnest.
Remind me again what examples you mean, because you haven't provided examples of any of these other kids' movies doing this.
And so on and so on. It doesn't try to smooth over these tonal transitions with good writing or performances. The writing is just terrible, and the performances are atrocious across the board. Instead, it just flings it all against the wall haphazardly.
Your lack of elaboration in this so-called review is telling.
Because these are all bullet points that the movie studio knows it has to hit. Because this movie, again, like so many kids' movies these days, is not the fulfillment of anyone's creative vision. It is just the product of a corporate algorithm. It is loud and ugly and obnoxious and disjointed.
In regards to your bullet point statement, it's less things the corporate entity wants, and more so things they have to do because of what they're adapting, because they care about making a good adaptation of the game. As for the claim of it lacking creativity, I will reiterate, your lack of elaboration is telling.
Because nobody who made the film actually cared about making a good film. And they have absolutely no respect for their audience. I mean, this movie could have been made by AI. We are at a point. If they start making movies with AI, we would not know the difference.
People have been making movies with AI, and people have in fact called it out. Remember the Monster Library? And everyone pointed out it was just an AI Monsters, Inc. knockoff?
Because they've effectively been doing that for 20 years now. Now, you might respond here, as many people on Twitter did after I gave a very brief review of this film in a tweet on the site a few days ago. You might respond that, well, this movie isn't for me. It's for kids. Well, first of all, tell that to the other people in the theater with us. I can tell you that my kids were by far the youngest people in attendance. There were multiple groups of adults. Just adults, no kids. Whole groups of them who bought tickets to Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
Well, that's your experience. When Carmen went to the theater to see the movie, there were plenty of families of children there. I agree it's a shitty argument, but your response isn't much better.
Also, tell it to the multiple grown adults who got angry at me on Twitter for not liking the movie.
You mean they corrected you for how wrong you were?
The funny thing is that a lot of those same people say, well, it's not for you, it's for kids. Why are you getting so upset about it then?
Because you were incorrect. Why are you so triggered about people on Twitter?
Why are you tearfully defending a movie that you claim is not for you either? In fact, one person told me that my negative comments had upset, and I'm repeating this phrase verbatim, had upset the, quote, Sonic community.
Obviously, when you're blatantly wrong about something that the fandom knows more about, of course they're gonna correct you.
Now, those are not kids who identify themselves as members of the Sonic community.
You don't know that.
My 8-year-old loves Sonic, but he's not on Twitter furiously defending the Sonic community from its detractors.
Because your 8-year-old isn't old enough for Twitter. Once they get older, they'll probably tell you how stupid you are.
So I agree that these kinds of movies are for kids, but I am not the one who needs to be told that, okay? Second, and this is most important, and it shouldn't need to be explained, but really it does, and that's really my only point here. It is possible to make a children's movie that, although it's for children, is still a good, high-quality piece of art.
Oh, so like Sonic 3.
I don't hate children's movies just because they're for children. Quite the opposite. As a father of 6, I've watched many, many children's movies. Okay, I've watched way more than the average person because I have so many kids. And I greatly appreciate the good ones. A few nights ago, just as an example, we watched the movie Iron Giant with my kids, and that's an animated children's film. It's also well written, beautifully illustrated, brilliantly performed, tonally consistent. It's funny and heartwarming, and at points it's sad, but it works all of that in a way that feels natural to the story. It's a children's film, and it's also a great film.
Doesn't the Iron Giant have themes about corrupt governments and the concept of death? Didn't you just complain earlier that the plot of Sonic 3 was too bleak? Is this not also bleak to you? Now, of course I'm not insulting the movie. I've heard good things, but you can't complain Sonic 3 is bleak for its mature themes, but then praise a movie with even more mature themes.
Anyways, gamers, have a good night, and I think I'm gonna go look for Carmen now. If I don't come back, feel free to track me down. But until then, hold up the fort while I'm gone.
Good luck out there!
Set you free.